Today we'll talk of what's asked of you. In Hebrew, how does this question sound like? It's Mashoel me imak. What's asked of you? In life, many things are asked of you. But you need not be flustered if you know who is asking. For example, you're having breakfast and your wife tells you what she wants to be done today. Yet you carry on reading your newspaper. Then without fail, there will come a time when she will ask you in a different tone of voice, "Dear, have you been listening?" When that happens, there's only one answer you can give. Where in the Bible is this same question asked? Mashoel me imak. What's asked of you? And who's asking this question? If you ask Moses, what would he say? In Deuteronomy 10:12, he records this question from the Lord. In Hebrew, Ma Adonai Elohecha shoel me'imak. Literally, what does the Lord your God ask of you? Sometimes it's translated as what does the Lord require of you? And to whom is this question directed? The answer is Israel, because Moses is talking to the Israelites. What's the answer that Moses gives? He gives a 5 color-coded answer. The green answer, to fear the Lord. The gray answer, to walk in all his ways. The purple answer, to love him. And the red answer, to serve the Lord your God. There's a 5th, this turquoise color, to keep his commandments. Why? Because it's for your good. And how are they to serve God? With all your hearts and with all your soul. So all in 5 things, do it all with your heart and soul. Does the last expression sound familiar? Where did we last hear of with all your heart and soul? It appears in the Shema confession in Deuteronomy 6:4. Unlike the next verse, Deuteronomy 6:5, one phrase is missing from the answer we just heard in Deuteronomy 10:12. What is missing? It's with all your might. Light green colored words. What does it mean? With all your might. Okay. Actually, the literal translation is uvkol modeha, which means not with all your might, with all your more. How can you have your more when you have given all that you have? It means that when you think that's all there is, there's actually some more you can give to God. So love the God, your God, the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and might, as translated in some versions, literally means with all your mind and being, or as the Message paraphrases, with all you have. Both Deuteronomy 6 and 10 are in agreement. It's the attitude we need when we do what we're asked of God. With all we have and all we have and more to come. So as to this question, what's the Lord ask of you? Moses gave us a 5-color answer, right? Fear God, walk in his ways, love God, serve him, keep his commandments. Who else in the Bible asked this question? It's the prophet Micah. In Hebrew, his name is Micah. It derives from the Hebrew word Mikayah. Mi is who, Ka is like, Yah is short form for Yahweh. So Micaiah has shortened to Micah. Micah is not the Hokkien Mikia. Okay. Where is this same question found in the book of Micah? In Micah 6:8, the ESV says, He has told you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness, or some say steadfast love, and to walk humbly with your God? Is Micah's list the same or different from Moses' list? Let's compare. In Micah's list, he mentions 3 items colored by 3 colors: green, purple, and gray. And green, do justly; purple, love mercy; and gray, walk humbly. How about Moses' list? Look on your left-hand side. There are 5 colors, so 5 items. What does each list emphasize? Moses asked for all these things having to do with God and man. God wants you to fear Him, walk in His ways, love Him, serve Him, keep His commandments. In other words, Moses says, start with the vertical relationship, start right, and stay right. How about Micah? His emphasis is on social justice. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Micah says, remember, you may be headed for heaven, but you are still living on earth. Question: are Moses and Micah speaking to the same audience or different audiences? Question 2: in meaning, not in words, in meaning, are both lists the same or different? In Deuteronomy 10, Moses is talking to Israel. So it's to the Israelites he's addressing. He's talking to the Jew. In Micah, he's talking to a man. Higit laha Adam, matov. It was said to you, O man, what's good? First, notice how Moses and Micah frames their questions. Moses says, what does God ask of you? In Hebrew, the verb shoel, the gray word on your left-hand side, is a participle of the Hebrew word or verb sha'al, which is translated as ask. Okay? So Moses' question is, what does God ask? But Micah uses a different word. He says, which is translated as, what does God require of you? The Hebrew word is doresh, a very strong word on your right-hand side. It's a participle of the Hebrew verb darash. It doesn't really mean require. It literally means demand. Demand. So let me enlarge these 2 words. In Hebrew, Micah's question is, what is God demanding of you? Let's take this a notch deeper. Moses is asking, what is God asking you as an Israelite? But Micah is saying, what is God demanding of you as a person, not just as an Israelite? In other words, what makes you whole, complete, fully human? Remember what Moses, how he ended the list of things God asked in Deuteronomy 10? He says, keep the commandments which are for your good. But what is good? Good is how Moses ends his speech. Good is how Moses tells us will be the outcome when we obey God. So as Moses ends by saying it's for your good, Micah starts. He starts by asking, what is good? ESV headline this portion from Micah 6, verses 6 to 8, with the heading, what does the God require? Doresh, which you now know, what is the God demanding of you? I will read all 3 verses. Okay? With what shall I come before the Lord? And bow myself before God on high. Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with 1,000 rams, 10,000 of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. How many questions have been asked on this page? If you count the question marks, one question mark belongs to the heading, which is in the editor's head, not in the Bible. 5 question marks belong to the text. But in essence, there are only 2 questions. The first is, with what shall I come before the Lord? And the second is, what does the Lord require of you? How does Micah answer the first green question? First, he says, how should I bow myself before God? Shall I bring offerings? Let's pause for a moment. Offerings. Do you know the 3 most common offerings listed in Leviticus are the burnt offerings, in Hebrew called a olah, an offering of a cent, a peace offering, in Hebrew, shalem, a peace offering, in Leviticus again, a sin offering, in Hebrew, hatah, a sin offering. Sin as an offering of atonement for unintentional sin. The other 2 are minha, called the grain offering, and asham, called the guilt offering. Why am I swamping you with so much talk about offerings? So ask you 2 questions. Which type of offering is mentioned here? Is it burnt, peace, sin, grain, or guilt? The answer is burnt, olah. And the Septuagint translates this in Greek into it's holocautoma, a holocaust. So you know the Holocaust in Germany, okay, where it came from, burnt. Second question, why choose burnt offerings when there are so many others, right? The answer is the most expensive, because the entire animal was consumed by fire and the worshipper or the priest got nothing. Okay, that's why it's the most expensive. How else will you know it's the most expensive? We have nothing left to eat. You know, for the sin offering, the priest had a portion to eat. What did he eat? Everything left after God's portion, which comprises kidneys and parts of the liver and fats. That goes to the priest. What's left for the worshipper? Nothing. Then for the peace offering, the priest had a portion to eat, which is just the breast and right thigh. The worshipper had the largest portion of all. But for the burnt offering, which is mentioned here, there was nothing left to eat. Everything was up in smoke. And the point of this digression into offerings, the burnt offerings were the most expensive. In other words, you not only give your best, it's all burnt. So it's offering of not only the best, but all of the best. What does Micah think is the best offering? He mentioned calves a year old. Why calves? Because veal is always more expensive than beef. It's the most tender. Okay. Then Micah asks, will God be pleased with 1,000 rams, 10,000 rivers? Shall I give my firstborn? What's he doing? He's building an ascending staircase only to bring you to the top and let you fall over the cliff. How? He says, how should I bow down? Maybe I should bring offerings. I will bring the finest calves, not bulls. Eh? How to curry favor with God? The more sacrifices, the better. How about 10,000 rams? How about 10,000 rivers of oil? And then how about sacrificing my firstborn? What's he doing? He's taking you to the Molech child sacrifice, an abomination. And what's the point? Micah is being sarcastic. But what is the theological point? It is not to do more and more. That's the point of this staircase illustration. Do more and more is similar to relying on the letter of the law rather than its spirit, because those who do so Don't know the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. So how does Micah show what the spirit of what God requires of man? In verse 8, Micah says, "Oh man, what is good?" Then he lists three things. What does God require of you? Three things. The green words, do justice. Purple words, love kindness. Gray words, walk humbly. Again, he's creating a staircase of 3 steps. Do these 3 steps stand alone, or are they connected with each other? Micah starts off 6:8 with a definition of what is good. Good is as defined by God. Do we know what good is? Yes, because the verse says, God has told you, oh man. And God's idea of goodness is not necessarily man's idea of goodness. So God does not ask, is it legal? Instead, God asks, is it lawful? God does not ask, were the procedures followed? He's interested in, was it moral? Once we have his understanding of what good means, Micah then proceeds with asking, what does the Lord require of you? What's he demanding of you? Let's start with the first of the 3 steps. Literally, the first step is to do something. In Hebrew, the left-hand side is asot mishpat. Asot mishpat. Asot is an infinitive. Mishpat is a noun. Do justice has no meaning unless we know the quality of being just. And the foundations of such a justice must be based on righteousness, meaning having a moral uprightness, and equitableness, meaning fairness, a timelessness, meaning it's applicable for eternity, because this definition of justice is from the eternal God. So the Domish part is to hold your community to God's standard of justice. In God's eyes, justice is for all, not just for the rich and powerful. So when God says do mishpat, he gives us an active verb, do, not a passive verb, which have been translated as let justice be done, hopefully by others, so I don't need to get my hands dirty. No, here's a call to action, which means there's no room to sit on your hands, to be complacent, or worse, complicit or silent. You cannot separate being biblically just from biblically righteous. They are inseparable twins. How do we know? Because Psalms 89:4 says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of the Lord's throne. Which means fairness is ground zero, and ground zero is just a threshold requirement, a starting point. But fairness alone is not enough, because it can become quickly morph into quid pro quo relationships. So if another person asks for help, you can ask in return, what will you do in return for me? For this to be a fair transaction. Being purely fair makes life purely transactional. Which is why Micah needs a second step. Love hesed. Okay? Which English translations render as love mercy or love kindness. The purple words on the left is ahavat hesed. Okay? Translated as love mercy. Ahavat is an infinitive construct verb, while hesed is a noun. I want to spend a bit of time explaining what the Hebrew word hesed, okay, the second Hebrew word on your left, means. It combines the ideas of unconditional love, generosity, and enduring commitment. In English, you could translate as a loyal love. How does a psalmist know that God's love is a loyal love called hesed? Because within one psalm, just Psalm 136, he uses the word hesed 26 times. 26 times. So Psalm 136 starts off by declaring, Hodu ladonai kitov ki leolam hasto, which in English means give thanks to the Lord for his good. Then it repeats 26 times, because God's hesed is forever. When you say 26 times, God's hesed, God's loyal love is forever. Okay. You are saying, hey, hesed is a very difficult word to illustrate, and I need to say it 26 different ways. In English, it's almost impossible to be captured adequately with one English word. So translators try and replace it with covenantal faithfulness or loyal love or mercy or kindness or steadfast love. But why such a fuss over one word, hesed? Because it's a description of what God gives of himself. In Exodus 36, where he says, the Lord, a merciful and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in hesed. It's in Hebrew, raf hesed, means a lot of hesed, which you call loyal love and faithfulness or truth. In Hebrew thought, since we're talking about loyal love, what is the function of love? In Hebrew thought, how does love function? Okay. I may have lost you, so I better repeat the two questions twice. In Hebrew thought, what's the function of love? In Hebrew thought, how does love function? First, love is not about you, the lover. It's about the other, called the beloved. Such love dethrones the ego and puts to work the fulfillment and desires of the other. How does one learn about love? One rabbi called Levi Yitzhak explained that he learned it from a drunk. He once passed two drunks drinking in the gutter and heard one of them saying to the other, I love you. And the other replied, no, you don't. Yes, I do with all my heart, protested the first drunk. And then the second insisted, if you love me, don't you know what hurts me? The second drunk was rebuking the first drunk for his self-centered approach to their friendship, asserting that you don't really love me at all. You just love how you feel when we are drunk together. True love, then, is not about how you feel in someone's presence. It's about how you make them feel in yours. True love is also other-centric, enduring, the opposite of infatuation, which is transactional, based on what you get, what you feel, and not what you can give. The second premise of Jewish love is this. Love is not primarily about how you feel, but about what you do. Hence the Torah's commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. That's Leviticus 19:18. What we are not saying is that one must never base one's actions on feelings or that feelings are irrelevant. Rather, the Torah is teaching that love, whether of God, others, oneself, spouse, or family, must be consciously cultivated. Because it's a collaboration of thought, word, and deed in concert with each other. Hence, it's called by Micah to do step 2. Love hesed. Love mercy. Love kindness. So step 1 is to do justice. Why do you need step 2? Why do you need kindness? Because without kindness, justice will be coarse, harsh, and even cruel. Let's ask the question the way around. If I have only kindness but no justice, what will I get? Just sentimentality. When justice and kindness are intermingled, it means we are practicing justice mercifully. Likewise, we should also practice mercy justly, because God does both. His mercies, they are new every morning. So steps 1 and 2 call us to extend ourselves to the poor, to be generous with our neighbors. Why then do you need step 3? Isn't it enough to be just and loving kindness? In the same way, a just and kind person will extend himself to others, be they the poor, the neighbors. Such a person will also extend himself to God. When you extend yourself to God, you will want to walk with God. And step 3 says, walk humbly with God. Why is there a need to walk humbly? If you walk arrogantly, your fairness and kindness become irrelevant because you have ended up mistreating others. Second question, why walk with God? Why not walk alone? Because when we walk with God, we discover how He walks. Then will we know at what speed God walks. 3 miles per hour. That's the title of a book by Kosuke Koyama. He describes how fast God walks. But why doesn't God walk faster? Because He wants a conversation when we walk with Him. The way He spoke to Adam when he was strolling in the garden in the evening breeze. And the point, when we walk with God, we realize that not everybody walks with God the same way. That's when we learn that people who walk differently with God are not wrong, nor religiously insincere. And that our path is not the only path that's correct. This is a lesson that's learnable only when we are walking humbly with God. What's important is not the particular path they take, but who on the path they are with. Once we recognize these differences, we will treat others fairly and with kindness. This is Micah's vision of how we should live. What's the context in which Micah gave us these 3 steps? Okay. Where's the hat from which he pulled out this rabbit? Okay, with 3 years, which we call 3 steps. Context is information that helps you to understand the message of a literary text, to make sense of it. Why is context important? Because a text without context is a pretext. In other words, to know why Micah prescribed the 3 steps, do justice, love kindness, walk humbly, we need not only to read verse 8 of chapter 6, but the preceding 7 verses to which we now turn. To make it easy, I've highlighted the relevant context in 3 colors. Okay. The green verses sound like a court case, like the state versus the defendant. Here it is the Lord versus the people. The blue verses represent the testimony in court. Here is the Lord recounting His past actions for His people. And the purple verses, which we read earlier, are the Lord's requirements for His people. What does the Lord require of you? What does He demand of you? So we won't touch this section again. It's now to the green and blue sections that we now turn. First, the green words. How does the Lord take people to court? He summons the mountains. He summons nature. How do you know this is a court case? Because of the Hebrew word in purple on your left, rif, which means to conduct a legal suit. Where do you find this word rif? It appears, for example, in water crisis in Exodus 17, where Moses asked the people, why do you rif? Why do you take me to court? Contend with me and tempt the Lord. Now, moving to the blue words. The Lord's opening salvo is this. My people, what have I done to you? How have I worried you? How do we know this is not the standard complaint that the Israelites have worshipped idols? Because as the message puts it, here it is God who is asking, how have I, as God, wronged you? Or as the NLT says, what have I done to make you tired of me? So God is not accusing them of not following His commandments, but that they find God wearisome, His commandments tiresome. So they start to worship like robots, from duty without devotion, going through the motion with no passion. They are sleepwalking spiritually. Then in verse 4, God pleads his case. Hey, don't you remember that I took you out of Egypt? In Hebrew, there's a play on the words, I worry you and I brought you up. Okay. Let me blow it up for you. Okay. In Hebrew, okay, I worry you is heletika. I brought you up is heelitika. Both words sound almost identical, but with totally different meanings. That's how you wake up your audience if they understand Hebrew. That's also how you put them to sleep if they don't. And this technique is called homophones. Homophones. Then secondly, God pleads his case. He says, look, I gave you great leaders, the yellow ones, Moses, Aaron, Miriam. They played the roles of king, priest, and prophet. Complete leadership. Then God says in verse 5, remember what? Is it the splitting of the Red Sea? Mount Sinai going with smoke and shuddering? Free bread from heaven called manna? In Hebrew, God is most polite and says, remember, please. In Hebrew, it says, zakana. Zakana. God doesn't want them to remember events. He wants them to remember people. He says, my people, remember. Remember who? Balak and Balaam. Both who tried to curse you. Anyway, what's Balaam doing here? When you hear the word Balaam, what comes immediately to mind? Hee-haw. That's right. It's a donkey. Balaam's donkey is one special ass. By the way, the same animal is called either an ass or a donkey. So when I speak of Balaam's ass, I'm not referring to a part of his anatomy. Do we know if Balaam's ass was male or female? How do you know it was female? Because the Hebrew text says his ass is called Aton, female, not Hamor, which would be male. Anyway, his ass sat on him. So Numbers 22:27 tells us, she lay down under Balaam. His ass started talking to him after he had beaten her 3 times. And she said, am I not your ass on which you have ridden me all your life to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way? And he said, no. In other words, for Balaam, having an ass to sit on top of him was not enough to open his eyes. The Lord opened his eyes for verse 31. The next verse says, then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam and he saw the angel with a drawn sword. And then he bowed down and fell on his face. Do you know how heavy an ass is? Easily 200 pounds. Some weigh up to 400. So for Balaam to be below a 200-pound ass, plus divine intervention, before he could know reality, before he could see danger, before he could perceive good and evil. Good thing the donkey sat on him to save him. So what's good? Remember in verse 6 to 8 of Micah, he starts off by asking, what's good? Matov, what's good? Before asking the second question, what does God require? Okay. Doresh mimika. What does God demand from you? This Hebrew expression, matov, what's good? Where have we heard it before in the Torah, the first 5 books? It's in the story of Balaam, in Numbers. Only after God opened his eyes, only then could Balaam see what was good. The first mention of good by Balaam is in the Hebrew text of Numbers 24. First verse, which says, Balaam saw it was good in the Lord's eyes to bless Israel. Okay. Kitov ba'enai Adonai. It's translated as, it pleased the Lord to bless Israel. What's good is again defined by the Lord. Then Balaam mentions good again when he saw Israel camping tribe by tribe. That's in verse 5, where he says, how lovely, matovu, are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel. Why does Balaam who had hoped that God would allow him to curse Israel, now bless Israel and call them good. Matov. He, in cahoots with Balak, had tried many times to curse Israel. What made him change his mind? To get the answer, we need to read the previous chapter for context. Okay? Just a few verses. In Numbers 23, you see the succession of attempts to curse Israel. How Balak and Balaam egg on each other. Chapter 23, verse 1. The green words, Balaam asked Balak, build for me 7 altars. And then the purple words, Balak, build 7 altars. Then the red words, Balaam again asked Balak, build for me 7 altars. 21 altars are fruitless attempts to bribe God, to change his mind to stop loving Israel. So Balaam could curse Israel and collect his reward. When did Balaam realize God will never allow anyone to curse Israel? When Balaam yielded to God's will. For Numbers 24 verse 2 says the Spirit of God came upon him and he said, Matovu, O Haleha Yaakov, how good are your tents, O Jacob. Mishkanoteha Israel, they are your dwelling places, O Israel. Notice Balaam did not say, look how these Israelites keep God's commandments. See how they religiously offered animals as sacrifices. Neither did he say, look how they love God. Nor did he say, look how they serve God. What did Balaam see that made him use the adjective good? Good was used to describe how the Israelites lived together as the tribes of Israel, as a fledgling nation of Israel. God, having redeemed this nation from his slavery, could not allow anyone, Balaam included, to curse Israel. Now put yourself in the shoes of Balaam. What would you have seen the tribes as arrayed? It's as shown here. All the tribes camping around the tabernacle, which symbolize not just God's presence, is a central location indicating the heart of the nation is God. This was a fitting reminder to people to have God at the center of their lives, not move to the wings. Now, if God is supposed to be the center of lives, why is Micah in chapter 6, verses 3 and 4 having to ask God, asking the people, how have I worried you? How have I worn you out? How have I become tiresome to you? And Micah is asking, using the voice of God, would God be less tiring to you if you make more offerings, costlier ones, including your firstborn? No, Micah is saying, when you are in that spiritual state, that spiritual stupor, you need a reset button. Without a reset button, you cannot rekindle your passion. It's not more sacrifices, not more hours in church, not more ministry to run away from your problems at home. Neither is it to build a church building in the heart of the city center. Micah is saying it's not just following the legalistic requirements of what's asked of you as an Israelite. It's heeding what God now demands of you as a human being. And how do you become fully human, reflecting the entire glorious image of God? Micah says, by doing justice, loving mercy, walking humbly with God. Is there an equivalent call in the New Testament to be fully human? Colossians 3 verses 17 23 give us 2 pointers. 17 verse 17 says, whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus. In the name of the Lord. In Greek is an onomatopoeia kurio. It says second point, verse 23. He says, whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men. Hosto kurio. In practical terms, how do these two verses guide us on how to be fully human when we treat people? First, treat them as if you are Jesus. Because Jesus responds to people never out of duty, but always from love. That's the meaning of do everything in the name of the Lord. Be like Jesus, to do like Jesus. In Micah's jargon, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Is there another way to teach us how to treat people? View them as if they are Jesus. Then do everything as for the Lord, as unto Him. Isn't that Micah again reminding us? Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. And now, finally, to our last slide. Why walking humbly with Jesus change us? Because walking with Jesus always opens our eyes. To see what? To see the world the way He sees. To go with Him to places we would rather not go. To act in the way He does. In conclusion, walking with Jesus will remind us to love people the way we love Jesus. And to love people the way Jesus loves us. When we walk with Jesus, doing justice, loving hesed, loving mercy and kindness is natural. So let's walk with Jesus today. Jesus. Amen.